Perfect. Yeah, that makes it a lot better. Thank you.
Can you raise it up?
Mm-hmm.
Man, Mike, you're getting picky.
Well, we want to see all of them. He still has good hair.
Seriously, hold on to that as long as you can.
My school psychologist in high school, he gave everybody nicknames, and mine was Pantene, which has stuck with me through the years. So
I love that. Well, Dakota, I can say that we are both, Pete and I, super excited to have you on with us today.
mm-hmm.
And no introductions to Pete is necessary. Sometimes we have folks who come on that maybe Pete knows, and he has to introduce them to me or vice versa. But with you, our introduction today is really more for the audience than anything else. So Dakota Malone, welcome to Making the City Smaller. And while I'm still talking, I will share with everyone that you and I crossed paths for the first time as members of Profound. If I have my memory correct, you and I might have walked in together from the parking lot.
Yep, that's right.
Literally no idea, where we were, because we were out in Geneva, New York at the Cracker Factory. Phenomenal venue, by the way, Pete. You can start to see the bistro lights, and you come around the corner, and it's beautiful, an old factory. And I parked my car, and we're coming off the heels of COVID. People aren't sure if we're wearing masks. This is kind of the first, at least for me, first time the big venue with folks in person. And Dakota and I walked in together, and I was instantaneously captured. And he didn't say more than probably 2 or 3 minutes of conversation, but I was immediately engaged, and I thank you, Dakota, for becoming a friend.
Powerful. I smile and laugh thinking back to that, because I'm working on another blog, and I was going to title it My Profound Year, and I was going to write essentially like a review / POV of my experience. And that first day was so funny, because it took me a couple tries to even get the courage to get out of my car. Not so much for the fear aspect and all the COVID stuff for me, but more of just oh my God, who am I gonna go pretend to be right now? And try to blend in with 100 other high-level entrepreneurs and just amazing people. And yeah, we instantly connected. I knew by your energy the moment I met you, Mike, that you were a special person. And thank you for having me on the podcast. I obviously got introduced to Pete through you as well. And you guys are two gentlemen that I really look up to and am inspired from. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on here.
Who did you choose to be that day?
Oh man, well, it's funny because even in the blog that I was writing, I remember I walked in, got our name tag. Everyone, already had drinks and was kind of doing their thing, and I went to the bathroom, and I was like, I wonder how long I can hang out in this stall until someone tries to use it, and I have to go talk to someone. So I definitely showed up as a scared version of myself, but just, as the night progressed, obviously kind of stepping into that vulnerability and getting connected with people and being as authentic as possible, which obviously led to an amazing year with Profound. So shout out to them.
So I've heard you talk, and I've talked with you. I've heard you speak in terms of some type of recording for your business and your blog and your vlog, however you want to, your podcast rather. So I don't get the impression from talking to you that guy even comes out of the car. Are you new to networking? Was it just explain it?
It's funny because I did door-to-door sales. I did direct sales for 7 years. And in 2017, I was the #1 salesperson for a large Fortune 200 company. And #1 door-to-door salesperson in the world, right? I had all sorts of records broken. And at the same time, I'm very introverted. I like to be alone, spend a lot of time alone. I enjoy, obviously, people, and I'm energized by people in a way. But even with Profound events, networking, building relationships, some of those events with Profound are all dayers, you know, and for me, I'm like burnt out by lunch and I'm like, all right, I need a nap, or I need to like go like put headphones on and sit in a corner for a little bit. And I definitely do that because I recognize that's who I am and what I need at this stage. But, you know, I think just with being back, kind of like with what Mike said, is circling back on the backs of COVID, you don't really, or at the time, I wasn't really sure what the general consensus was. You know, I spent a lot of time in St. Louis the year before. I had actually just moved to New York the summer previously, or back to central New York. And I feel like New York was hammered and marketed a lot more fear-based, kind of political-driven stuff when it came to COVID and the pandemic and all of it. So I think it was just a combination of like kind of getting back out there, getting back into the mix, seeing where the general consensus kind of lied with all that stuff. And it's so funny because, you know, obviously it all kind of worked out perfectly, exactly as it should have, and everyone's really cool and never really turned out to be an issue. But yeah, definitely just showing up to a big event center by myself, didn't know anyone. It felt like everybody else was connected with each other except for me, you know? So
I'll be honest with you. I've been to many of those throughout the years. I don't go to so many anymore. I think we host some, so I haven't been the natural guest in a long time, but I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of people are probably afraid to admit it, but seems though you went first. I remember that same, and I always rolled with the punches, right? I was always able to work the room, so to speak. I hate to even say that I used to do that, but you know, you have to somehow find a way to break into that, especially if you're late to the event or you feel like there's a group that's already kind of established their dominance at one side of the room, and you kind of feel like the oddball kid coming into a new school, I guess. So I can relate to that, and I'm glad that you led with the vulnerability, because it's something I probably haven't reflected on in my own weaknesses in a long time. So I appreciate that.
I think the anticipated news I want to get out of you today is hearing about your journey down to South America. But putting that aside, if you can, tell us a little bit more about just who you are and what you're up to these days, and you know, who is Dakota Malone?
I always like to start my story and tell people that I was raised in between two cornfields in the middle of nowhere in a small village in upstate New York. You know, so I grew up in the Oswego town area, which is where I'm at currently. And yeah, I grew up in a small town in an average middle class home. And for me, my life was, I would say, different than the average child, not by choice. Upon birth, I had 2 emergency heart surgeries almost as soon as I was born. So within the first couple months of being alive and into the world, I had a couple emergency heart surgeries, which, if you can imagine, impacted the way that I was raised as a child. And I think I had an overprotective mom in the first place. And so that kind of doubled down, and I lived a pretty, I wouldn't say sheltered life. I lived a pretty average life, aside from, you know, I couldn't play sports, anything contact related. You know, growing up, I would go to the cardiologist like once a year to do an annual checkup. I was actually just reflecting on this with my dad. I used to love growing up and, you know, getting to go to Syracuse, which is a 45-minute drive. But at the time, it felt like such a far away and magical place, you know, the big city, literally because I was born between 2 cornfields, like on both sides, you know, so I didn't get around much. But like, you know, going to Syracuse, and I went to Krause, which is where my sister works now. And just like looking down on Marshall Square with my dad, and, you know, going to get pizza across the street, like it was always such a great thing to reflect on. As soon as I was born, I had a narrow aortic heart valve, which is the main valve that pumps all the blood to the body. And so they went in and tried to fix it. They ended up breaking it, and it was leaking blood back into my heart. And then a couple weeks later, again, they kind of went in through my back, had another heart surgery. That was my second one, and kind of trying to patch things up again and make it all work. And obviously I lived, but my heart was leaking back blood from my aortic valve being broken each time my heart would beat. And so, you know, I would run 30 feet at a time and my whole chest would heat up, which again, kind of led to a limited childhood in terms of my health and movement. And I would say that it also, that's why movement became one of my core values, staying in motion, the idea of finding new space, which came up a lot during my trip to Colombia. But all of that I hold in really high regard. Also with my spine, I have a 50-degree scoliosis curve. It was originally 51. It's actually down below 49 now. So I've been on a healing journey with that. But this whole idea of being able to, 1, be alive, 2, find movement, 3, try to live a normal life as a child. That was all some challenges that I had that I think that just a lot of people didn't. And so trying to keep a lot of that stuff in mind, I had 3 more heart surgeries in high school. And so that led to a combination of, really trying to understand myself in the world. At the same time, I'm like going through these changes, trying to become, a man, and thinking about school and what's next and all of that on top of it. But I had 2 heart surgeries during junior and senior year of high school. And then a week after I graduated high school, I had my 5th and final, which was an open heart surgery. And I ended up having my aortic valve replaced. As far as turning the dial on my life, some of those experiences that I went through during that time, which obviously left me with a bunch of physical trauma, a bunch of other traumas that I had to kind of learn and work through, which set the stage for my life and where I'm at now. I think it really allowed me to kind of embrace being a wise soul and acknowledging that life is short at a young age. And so that kind of springboarded me into building my life resume. I think you see on my calendar behind me, I'm obsessed with building my life resume from experience that, beyond work and beyond careers, just really valuing that every day matters and life's a gift. And I'm out to maximize my life and inspire others. And so that's led to my businesses and my life experiences where I'm at now. And I guess I'll pause there for some reflection, just trying to lay the table out.
So I've listened to your podcast, Heart Matters. I recommend it highly for anybody who is looking to be inspired. Your inflection, your tone, the way you present and articulate your message is awesome. So that's, my praise aside. I know you were the manager of a baseball team in high school for your way to fit in, but what was there a passion that you found? Here you are, a young guy going in and out of hospitals, being rather restricted. Was there something else that you found that wasn't sports related, that was your thing, a collection or a fascination, or something that kind of is part of that resume that's listed on the wall behind you, if that makes sense?
There was definitely some forced activities for sure. My parents made me go to Catholic church school. So every Monday night was church school, and then following that was Boy Scouts, which, although at the time I very much rejected growing up, my dad wouldn't let me leave until I finished my Eagle Scout. And so I did, and I'm very proud of that. And that's something that also really shaped me, being in the woods, nature, understanding the relationship between us as humans and nature. I think that a lot of times people, even that live in big cities, that don't necessarily live in the country between 2 cornfields, get to understand what it means to even step out and be grounded and really connect with nature and using that as medicine. And I got to do that a lot as a kid. So just camping, exploring, adventuring, all the activities that came with that, I would say just like really being outdoors and embracing that. And then other hobbies here and there, like I got really into photography and film, and really just trying to find an outlet to express myself. Music as well. In high school, I played in a metal band. I was listening to just hardcore metal music. One of my best friends was really, really good at the guitar, and he also listened to it. And we were in like trigonometry in like 11th grade, and I remember turning around to him and just like we were like learning about math. And I just remember turning around and be like, "Do you want to just start a metal band?" It's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that's how we got into that. But I love all sorts of music. I self-taught myself mostly with guitar. I self-taught myself piano, keyboard, and I played jazz band and kind of really expressed through music for sure.
Right now, you're back in Oswego County. You're still in the sustainability world for a career-wise. What are you doing when you're not working and you're not the global salesman of the year as a young 20-year-old? Now you're getting seasoned.
So my life as an entrepreneur is pretty boring. I made the decision to sacrifice my 20s towards entrepreneurship, learning, and building my business. So right now, especially coming off the backs of my trip to South America and my ayahuasca initiation, my life is pretty intentional right now. Meaning that, I have a little medicine table that I go to each morning. I, light my candle and turn on some medicine music. I set my intention for the day and think about who I want to be for the day and the things that I want to do, the wisdom that I want to speak, the conversations that I want to have, and really just try to set the stage for a more intentional life. That was one of the things that I thought was so beautiful and so simple. As far as a takeaway from my trip to Colombia is, one, how much more I could simplify my life. I am in sustainability, and I'm a big believer in not necessarily minimalism, but not overextending by any means. And, with that, I think about how much more simple of a life I can have. So I try not to complicate it. So my mornings are really intentional. My days filled with building my company and working on my business. And then really I save my nights for it. It really depends. Right now I was inspired to finish Spanish. So that was a pandemic project that I started, was learning to speak Spanish. And again, traveling to Colombia, sitting with an ancient community that also happens to speak Spanish. It was like opening up a veil to being able to communicate with a mysterious world and build rapport with people that are so remotely far away from how I'm living. So, I might take tonight and probably do my 15-20 minutes of I'll listen to like a TED Talk in Spanish and try to dissect it and really working on getting conversational. But that aside, I would say I live a pretty normal life. I'll kick it with my friends, call them up, see what they're up to. A lot of my friends are not necessarily I have friends all over the place. I've moved 40 times in the last 10 years. So I have friends everywhere. So, we'll get online, we'll play video games together and kind of keep our circles going.
All right. So now you got my attention. Not that you didn't have it before, but 40 times. What's causing that? What is it? Just job related, your interest to see all the different parts and corners of our world? Please walk me through that.
Oh man. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. Part of it, I at times would agree that I was trying to run away from myself. There were other moments where it was completely diving into the unknown, just embracing the mysteries of life. Other times it was for work. A lot of it was I would move within the city. So, for example, I went from Syracuse to Columbus, Ohio for work. And then I think I moved 1 or 2 times while I was in Columbus, and then came back, went to Buffalo. So I've lived in sections, and I also lived in Italy for a little bit in 2017. But I've lived in sections of the country and then, kind of moved around, mostly because I like to get sublets. After moving the first few times and like having to refurnish my apartment each time because I went from Columbus to Buffalo and didn't want to bring my stuff with me, I was just like, all right, I'm just wasting money at this point. So then I would focus on finding, 3-month fully furnished sublets, which gave me, being an explorer, an Eagle Scout, an adventurer, like I acknowledge that side of me very much. I love to get out and explore and see what else is out there. I'm in love with the idea of being a digital nomad, and being able to travel and see different aspects of the world. And I also recognize that it's all the same thing happening in different places, which is just such a beautiful thing. But I do acknowledge that I love to travel and kind of get out and see the world.
Some of the notes that I had taken just from listening to your words and kind of watching your social media engagement is hero's journey. And I thought that was, I like that. And I imagine that's a facet of that. Is that fair?
100%. Yeah, I think that, and this is just a personal opinion, but I think that men and women can obviously both go through their own version of the hero's journey. I don't think it's specific to men by any means. But I think there's something very sacred about a man being able to go and take that journey for himself or herself. It's obviously like a very cyclical, I forgot the origination of it. but there's cycles to the hero's journey, and I think it's a naturally occurring part of life. And I just, I'm in the belief that the deeper you go and the more willing you are to explore, which requires attention, which is why I think a lot of people don't do it, because we're so distracted and everything else is taking up our attention. But when we can kind of reflect inwards and understand our own personal journey and what that looks like, you could very much say on a spiritual level, I think life starts to get a lot more interesting, and you learn a lot more about yourself going on those types of journeys.
I like it.
I originally was obsessed with the idea of a mini retirement coined by Tim Ferriss, one of my favorite authors. Tim Ferriss has the idea that a mini retirement is anything more than 3 months, essentially. So if I wanted to go travel the world, a lot of people take their 2 weeks of vacation and they'll go to whatever, Mexico for a week. But instead, the argument is that, instead of waiting until you're retired to be able to go and travel, I remember being in Italy, and I remember I had like 70 pounds on my back because I just took my carry-on with me and I was just going city to city. I just remember seeing this older dude, and he was obviously like retired at this point, traveling the world with his wife, and he was so tired and he could barely walk. And I was just like, dude, like I will, like that was what I needed to see at the time, because I was like, okay, this is something that I can actually build on and start to learn from. So I like the idea of traveling to a place for an extended amount of time, usually longer than 3 months to a year, deciding if you like the place, and then if not, moving on. And I've connected with lots of digital nomads on LinkedIn, even a lot of, friends now that work out of Bali and Mexico and Costa Rica. And so again, I'm aligned with that. Best friend lived in Italy. He was in the military. He was a canine handler in the military. And so he called me up one day and he's like, Dakota, you should just quit your job and come to Italy. And this is when I was doing door-to-door sales. And the problem was I was getting so sick because I wasn't taking care of my health and I wasn't taking care of myself, that I was sacrificing everything for work, and I was just in really bad shape. So, with my spine, so I have an S curve on my back, that's what scoliosis is. And if you can imagine, walking up and down steps to go door to door every single day, that really started to screw up my back and just overall health. Like I said, I just wasn't taking care of myself. And so I had a lot of money saved up, and he called me up and I had nothing to lose, and I was like, let's go. And so I went to Italy on a whim, and I used his house kind of like a home base. And so, I would stay in Italy about an hour north of Venice. But once you get over to Europe, plane tickets are extremely cheap. We flew to see our buddy in the UK for like $39 round trip. I would take buses and trains, and really, my goal was to kind of get a little taste of each city. And there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened in each of the times I would travel. But in Italy specifically, I think at the time I was looking, this is a funny story. And I'm just going to be vulnerable and uncensored. So I'm a cannabis user, right? And in Italy, I didn't have any cannabis. I stopped smoking for a long time. And I was in the park one day, just chilling on my bicycle, and this old Italian guy kind of rode his bike into the park, and he started smoking next to me, and he was smoking hash and tobacco. And I didn't speak a word of Italian other than ciao. And, so that was just a very formal greeting. And before you know it, this old Italian guy and I are just sharing a joint on a park bench. And it's the more we're engaging in conversation, trying to understand each other, the more I actually understand him. And all of a sudden he's telling me all about his life. I remember it so well. And he's like, yeah, I just, I like to come to the park and relax before I go and see my kids and my wife. And it was just such a special moment, because he kind of reminded me of my dad, and just a weird Italian, and we're Italian anyway, so I guess maybe that's why. But it was just really just one of those things. The universe will bring people into your life, and it'll bring experiences into your life that you just kind of keep with you and remember. And yeah, that was the first thing that came up, so I thought I'd share that.
I like it.
I think it's great that you started to understand what he was saying because you're spending time with him, but I'm thinking that the hash kicked in and it didn't matter. You got it. It was
hash translate. Yeah.
If we're telling stories, there's a story that you told me. What's the one where there was the neighbor on the back porch were you on a deck, and it was late at night or something?
Yes, my Budapest story.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to share. So I was same timeline. I was in Europe. I was in Italy, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to Budapest. And my best friend Jack, he had gone for the New Year earlier, loved it, recommended the city, and I was like, cool. It was going to be my first trip solo because Jack ended up getting into ALS, which is Airman Leadership School, and so he was basically getting promoted in the military, and so he couldn't come with me. And so I decided to make a solo trip to Budapest, booked my Airbnb. I think I took a bus there. Yeah, I took a bus there. I remember being in the bus terminal and this Polish teenager spilled orange juice on me. And again, we tried to have this whole interaction, and maybe it must have been the hash in the last.
Yeah, you had no
because
hash.
I had no idea what this kid was saying. And I remember we tried to add each other on Facebook because it ended up being all cool. But so anyway, so I get an Airbnb, I get to Budapest, I'm exploring the city, and the Airbnb host was really cool. He picked me up, he brought me to the Airbnb. Budapest is kind of I don't want to say a Gothic town, but it's got that very old architecture to it. Beautiful city. But it was dark and rainy, so it was definitely a mood when I was there for sure. And so he shows me where the Airbnb is. It's in this really large multifamily apartment building, goes way up, and I'm all the way up at the top. And when you get to the top, it's it was a square building, and it opened up into a courtyard. So it had French windows or French doors almost that opened up. And there's this guy that was smoking a cigarette in the corner because it was a place you could smoke from. It wasn't I don't know how to describe it really. I wish I had a photo of it. But it was a large, almost a balcony type deal. So it was open, but I didn't see this guy. And so all of a sudden he emerges from the shadows and he's smoking a cigarette. It was very creepy. And I was like, oh, hey, nice to meet you, man. And he didn't really, he's speaking broken English. And I was just really creeped out by the whole experience. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to leave. And I was like, hey, it was nice to meet you. And he takes a step towards me and he gets nose to nose with me, just right in my face. And, in broken English, he was just it was nice to meet you too. And I was like, all right, now I'm definitely freaked out. What is going on? And I was maybe whatever mannerisms, I've never been to Budapest. I don't know. So my Airbnb was behind this doorway. And on the other side of the door, there was two apartments, my Airbnb and then this guy's apartment. But I didn't know that at the time that it was his. And once I go through this door, that was it. No one was hearing me. No one, there's no one there. It was an empty building on the top part of it, And so of course he starts following me as soon as I turn around to leave. So I'm heading to my apartment and he's right on my tail. I go to turn the key to my apartment door, my Airbnb, and he comes in behind me, grabs my side and tries to push himself into the apartment with me. And I'm just full freaking out at this point. What is going on? I get him off of me, shut the door, and immediately put a chair underneath the door so he can't get in. And so I'm momentarily safe. And I remember scrambling, just trying to find the biggest knife I could in the apartment while all this stuff is going through my head. Is this guy trying to traffic me? Is he trying to kill me? Does he want something else? What is going on? And so he gives up and he goes into his apartment, and it's the walls are paper thin and it's quiet. So I could hear every step that he was taking. And I was like, dude, this is madness. And so I call up, my best friend Jack, and I'm like, dude, where are you? He's like, I can't come get you right now. I just remember sitting up all night with a knife in my hands, fetal position on the couch, just what is going on? I hit up the Airbnb owner, and he's like, oh, that's so weird. Normally he's a great guy. I've never heard this before. And I was like, dude, I'm definitely being trafficked. I was full convinced that this guy was trying to get me. And so I ended up escaping in the middle of the night. The guy gave me a full refund, but I was homeless halfway through the night in Budapest because I just escaped. I had nowhere to go. And so, I had my big old backpack on me, and I was just wandering around Budapest all morning, going through the gardens. And I was having a good time for what it was. I was just grateful to be alive. But Mike, I was telling you, I think that would have been a lot more traumatizing for me if it didn't end up ending up the way it did, because what ended up happening was I wandered my way into a beautiful Hungarian bathhouse. It was like a hotel and they had like a bathhouse. And this was my introduction into cold plunging. And so, they would have like a steam room and it was like 200 degrees with the eucalyptus going. So it's just powerful steam. And then you get in the ice bath. And again, it just like ended up blossoming into the most beautiful day ever imaginable in Budapest. Yeah, it was a crazy day that ended up turning into something really special for me. Cold plunges and just, leading all into my holistic practices and self-healing. So that's my Budapest story.
And I don't know at this point, Pete, when Dakota told me that story and a couple others, I probably at that moment I was like, all right, Pete and Dakota have to meet. Between the cold, this guy with the hat on, he goes and sits in, ice cold water and in the lake or in the stream and does it for mental exercise. And I'm thinking there's no way. And then, the floating and just all of it, you two are way more in tune with your mind and body and soul than I am. And, I'm grateful that I can live vicariously through these stories.
Well, we're gonna get so you do it too.
Oh yeah, we're getting Mike in the cold plunge here soon.
I think we should start about with the floating, just so he doesn't get traumatized too quickly.
I was telling Pete, I go to the aqua spa in Oswego, and they have their infrared sauna, they have the cryotherapy for the freezing, they've got the floating, and all of that stuff is just so, you want to talk about getting in touch with your body in order to get in touch with your mind so that you can understand your soul. There's obviously like that's the pathway to it. And all of those are great modalities for kind of getting into that stuff.
So a little bit philosophical, but again, back to listening to your content, and I heard you say in a few different instances that you had always been told when you were growing up that you had an old soul. With the digging in, the diving in, the exploring, have you found that to be true yourself?
Yeah. So I'm writing up my trip report right now for my ayahuasca initiation, and I was trying to set the table, very much how I told my, kind of set the table for my life story. But as far as my healing story goes, during one of my, I have studied hypnosis and NLP for almost a decade now, after needing to understand how to have a conversation with myself to basically to keep myself alive. During my 4th heart surgery, I was wide awake for it. And so with that, I was 16 years old, understanding language and the power of that. I didn't understand it at the time, but what I was doing was talking to myself in a way that was being able to utilize more resources in my brain to protect me from getting more trauma. And so in the studying of that, I did a lot of hypnosis sessions. And so there's something called past life regression. And that's essentially, and again, for the sake of just getting everybody on the same page, of course, we can just say it's an unconscious representation of our psyche. And in this past life regression, I went all the way back to Egypt. So as far as, do I have an old soul and what, all of that, I definitely sense the fact that timelines, right? So I study timeline therapy as well. Understanding the concept of timelines and how the past, present, and future is all simultaneously happening at the same time starts to get a little bonkers. But yeah, the short answer is yes, I absolutely do believe that, in my introspection, I've come to understand the many lives that we've all lived.
Just thinking about how that might work, or trying to have a dialogue associated. I'm new to that way of thinking. I'm new to exploring that. If you'd said that to me 3-4 years ago, I probably would have smiled and kept on with the conversation, but been like, I think he might have had some hash before the conversation. But today, in an effort to try to understand, I don't know if it's midlife, I don't know if it's just humanity and some of the changes and things that have happened in the world. Like I've dug in hard to try to figure out exactly who I am and what does make me fulfilled and what does make me happy, and why I think the way I think, and what causes depression and what causes anxiety, and how can I do my own, to use your words, my own version of healing. So I actually, those type of topics are where I get excited. So I think it's great. I think it's really awesome. What's next, Dr. Durkin?
Are you still practicing jujitsu and Muay Thai?
So I still actively practice Muay Thai, not jujitsu. The nearest gym is about a 50-minute drive, and just not that committed to being able to do that, knowing that I'd go home feeling crippled like that and I'd drive home. And I knew I wouldn't have the consistency. You need to show up at least 3 times a week to make progress in jujitsu. And right now that's just not for me, but Muay Thai, yes.
How about yoga, Pilates, any of those more less intense physically, but more intense mentally?
Totally. Yeah, yoga changed my life. I was 21, 22 years old. I went to the orthopedic surgeon in Syracuse, and he looked at me, and I waited like an hour for the doctor to walk in. He finally walked in. He's like, Dakota, we've got all these great plans, like it's all going to work out. Here's your surgery report, and we can fuse you from top to bottom so that your spine's completely transfused. You won't have any mobility the rest of your life, and there's no guarantee that you won't be out of pain, but this is the best path forward. And I just remember like crying, just breaking down crying in front of him. And I was like, dude, like I'm 21, 22 years old, like however old I was. Like, what do you even, like, why would you even present this to me? And,
Right.
They had full confidence that that was the right path forward. And I remember leaving, but that was the day that I really swore to myself that I was going to figure it out. And that's what prompted my healing journey on top of my heart surgery stuff, was really my journey with my spine. And I've had a lot of revelations with that, including during my Colombia visit. Yeah, that's what sparked my healing journey. Shortly got into yoga after that, and that unlocked, again, going back to movement and finding space and just understanding breath work and how to control the breathing and slow your heart rate. Yeah, I'm a big fan of yoga and all of that.
What came first for you, meditation or yoga, or vice versa?
Definitely yoga. Yeah, I only recently got into meditation over the last few years through Dr. Joe Dispenza. Huge fan of his work. I think the man's a genius, needs to be protected at all costs. And yeah, yoga and physical movement definitely came for me before.
It's interesting because I had tried yoga a few times, both in a class setting. My daughter was interested in it. My wife, we went and did like a rooftop yoga somewhere in downtown
Nice.
Syracuse before pre-COVID. And then, I was a home study YouTube. There's a channel that I was watching, but I always struggled with it. I was not very flexible, but I felt like it was just torturous to try to get where I was supposed to be, breathing. And then I adapted the practice of meditation, and that learning to breathe and be conscious of the breath first for me made it so the next time I tried yoga, it was a whole different, and that's why I was just curious to see how, what your path was. So interesting.
No, I love that. Yeah.
So we got to take a turn. I mean, I've heard Colombia several times. It just keeps leaking into this conversation. So I think it's asking for its chance. Walk us through your introduction to it. What got you thinking that way on a high level, in terms of like someone saying, hey, here's how you could, how'd you figure this out? How'd you find this? And walk us through it if you would.
Sure. Yeah. So I began to understand ayahuasca. I think it was first mentioned to me by my ex, actually. She had mentioned or made a passing joke that she needs to just go drink a bunch of ayahuasca and like work on all of her stuff. It was like a passing joke, like early in our relationship. But I'm also a big fan of like the Aubrey Marcus podcast. Joe Rogan really kind of launched and helped create On It, which was Aubrey Marcus's health company, supplements, workout equipment, apparel, etc. And then Aubrey launched his own podcast, and on that, he's been what he calls a spiritual warrior for a long time, starting off, vision quests at a very young age, early teens, and then, growing up and basically being a part of these different healing processes, including ayahuasca trips. And he would break them down on his podcasts, kind of explain what was going on, what was happening. And so I slowly became more and more acquainted into the plant medicine world over the last few years, really. And so when I first heard about it, I knew that it was a calling almost immediately. But I knew that there had to be a timing in all of it, obviously. And, you know, when I first heard about it, I was not nearly as ready as I needed to be. And so it always kind of sat in the back of my mind that I knew that was an option. You know, I've been studying plant medicine for the last few years, and including cannabis. You know, I treat cannabis like a plant medicine, even when it's, you know, hashed with an Italian man. You know, for me, cannabis first really, you know, it became a crutch at one point because I used it to treat my chronic pain from my spine and heart and everything else. But really, I came to understand cannabis as plant medicine for a long time. And so that eventually got me into the world of psychedelics and understanding how to use, you know, mushrooms as plant medicine, and being very intentional about creating these experiences to allow your mind to expand, right? You know, I think it's a personality trait, again, that Dr. Jordan Peterson mentions as far as big 5 personality traits. Openness is something that's measured in terms of personalities. And so I have a very open-minded personality. I think after being dead multiple times and seeing things and experiencing things as a young kid, again, like the dial on my life was changed at a very young age. And so that made me very open to experiences, which led into my traveling and everything else I do. But then again, studying hypnosis the past 10 years and just being aware of what the unconscious mind actually is, how it operates, and how it sets the stage for our entire lives. That was also something that I was already very in tune with. And so I think the combination of just like curiosity, understanding how to use plants, and then knowing that, you know, my belief is that the psyche is really the final frontier. You know, we've gone to the space, you know, we've got the topography of the ocean and starting to layer that out. But my opinion is that, you know, we're not going to solve anything on the outside in our external world until we solve it on the inside in our internal spaces. And so very much being able to take the dive into our own psyche, look at what we don't want to look at, and really integrating the parts of ourselves that, you know, need to be loved ultimately, was just something that I was interested in because I was aware of the trauma that I had, and I was on a quest to heal it. In each of these plant medicine ceremonies I would go through, I would have these profound experiences where I would get a little bit more healing. And so those were serving as breadcrumbs up until this ayahuasca initiation. And so I think February of last year, I had wrote in my journal, I need to go down to Colombia and do ayahuasca with the native guides in 2022. And it was just a passing thought. But it's funny because I didn't find that journal entry until I was already on my way to, like, I already knew I was going to be accepted and I was going. And I was like, wow, like I literally wrote this down, you know, going back to timelines and destiny and all of that. Again, I knew that this healing process involved going to some pretty dark and deep places. And that's essentially how I got initiated into being able to understand that. So I understood and listened to an Aubrey Marcus podcast. He hosted the retreat owner that I was staying with. So that's how I originally heard about this spot in Colombia. After listening to Sean, who owns the retreat and kind of runs it, I was just very much aligned with some of the things that he was saying. And I was there to do some work. And so I knew that he was the guy I was going to go to. It was a lot more small group. A lot of ayahuasca retreats are short. They're packed with people. They're kind of bougie. And this was, you know, in the jungle with a ancient community that's been practicing it for 1,000+ years, with a master healer who really had dominion over the Amazon and really understands what it means to do this work. And so for me, that was just like a full fuck yes. And I was like, yeah, this is the place that I need to go.
You said accepted. So is it where where you have to reach out to see if they'll even let you come based on who you are and what you have going on? Or explain that for me if you would.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things I really appreciate is about the native guides was their ability to basically determine who was a good fit and who wasn't. And of course, like, you know, we would do video chats, but really it would be revealed in the medicine. And so what that means is, you know, this community will go and drink ayahuasca twice a week, every week. You know, it's what they do. It's their lives. And the retreat owner, Sean, would take the questionnaires into ceremony and drink ayahuasca and then go through the questionnaires and use that to understand who was ready to do the work and who wasn't. And so from there, then it would go into like an actual video call process of like, hey, we took a look at your questionnaire. This is what I'm feeling. What does that actually look like for you? And then again, it's a small group. So, you know, people from all over the world apply to go. And when I had talked to him, he was only doing 4 people at a time, and his December class was full. And he's like, you can come in the new year, we're filming a documentary and you can be a part of it, or you can come in February. And I was like, well, I'm going to be really busy. You know, like I don't think anything else could work other than the December. And I kind of let fate decide. I left it to the universe. I was actually at the Profound event, like our Q4 at the Tailwater, and I was like showering. And I just remember this moment of just like, you know, like, I'm just going to let this go. Any expectation of if I'm supposed to go and do this or not, it was kind of like still up in the air. I was telling people that I was going and I had applied, but I wasn't accepted. But I just like literally took a shower, let it go. And I was just like, hey, like if this is meant to be, then it is, but I don't have any expectations. I felt it leave my body. And then, you know, 12 hours later, I get a call and he's like, hey, you're coming to Colombia. I'm making room for you. And I was like, oh man. So that's what started it.
All right. So walk me in from there. You got my attention.
Okay. So from there, it's all about prep work. So the 30 days leading up to taking ayahuasca, the idea is to go in as pure and as clean as possible. And so for me and for people who take it, you start what's called a dieta. And a dieta is a minimum of 3 days, but you know, and it can go as intense as you want. You know, traditionally people spend time alone in the jungle. They don't shower, they don't communicate. And it's a way for you to build up, you know, again, you want to be as pure as possible so you can form the strongest relationships with plants. And I didn't really understand what that meant until you take ayahuasca and then you're like, okay, this makes sense, because it's all about cleaning your body. And so you want to be clean. In your mind, in your spirit, etc. And so really the first 30 days, my days were spent minimal work, prayer, meditation, really hard workouts, you know, working on breathing, doing stair steppers, taking long walks, and just really understanding, you know, my lung capacity. Sometimes when you're deep in the medicine, you can just I don't want to scare people and say stop breathing per se, but it can get very, very heavy feeling. And so you need to be trained. And so the first 30 days leading up to it is all about this training. And so, you know, again, clean body, clean mind, clean spirit. Spent the 30 days, no food, no meat, no processed foods. You know, it was basically water with lemon essential oil in it and a very alkaline diet. So no sorts of sugars or anything like that. So very strict diet, no smoking cannabis, no drinking, no sex, it was like being a monk essentially for 30 days. And, that was tough for me. You know, it was challenging. I had done Sober October. I do it every year. So I was already kind of, clean and pure. And, you know, I'm not a big drinker by any means anyway. So I was coming off of Sober October, and I was already kind of like in the groove of that. And so I just kept it going, which was nice. And I felt that really helped me and was also very ceremonious because even with cannabis, it's not something that mixes well with ayahuasca per se. And so definitely wanted to make sure that it was completely out of my system. And so again, doing Sober October, going in November, that was like enough time. It was a nice 60-day window. Packed my bags the last couple of days, you know, went to a Christmas party for work, kind of said my final goodbyes, you know, ate fruit when everyone was at the Christmas party dinner enjoying like, you know, the five course buffet, and I had like just berries and, you know, my water. And yeah, I set sail for Colombia. During this whole time, all sorts of stuff is coming up in my dreams, just having super vivid dreams, all sorts of crazy stuff. A lot of, again, you know, ayahuasca is called the vine of death. They say that when you take it, it shows you what you don't want to look at. And so again, even in my dreams, just very vivid, very lucid, seeing my shadows, understanding the parts of me that were coming up that were ready to be reviewed. You know, it was definitely a little bit jarring, lots of anticipation, obviously. But again, going back to the hero's journey, I was already committed. You know, I knew that. I wrote it down in my journal. I didn't know if this guy was legit. I didn't know where I was going in Colombia. I wasn't going with anyone that I knew, but I knew that I was willing to go, and I knew that that's where the gold was on the other side of the unknown.
Both your parents are still with us?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a relationship with both of them still?
Yep.
All right. So you always mentioned your mom briefly, but I'm thinking about her, right? Not that your dad wasn't along for the journey of watching you come through that traumatic experience as a kid, but I just know how my mom thinks. I know how my wife thinks about our kids. And how did your mom think? What did she think about your health and your condition with going and doing the vine of death?
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I didn't really. It sucks for them because they were so unprepared. Because I didn't even know I was going until 30 days before, right? So I like get home from the Profound event, and I remember I got accepted. And at some point, I talked to my mom and dad over the next day or so, and I was like, "Hey, like, you know, I made the decision to go to Colombia." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Yeah, like you, like whatever. You know me, like you're used to this stuff." So I'm going to Colombia, and you know, I'm going to go do medicine in the jungle. And they're like, "What does that even mean?" You know, my dad's a little bit more hip to it. He listens to his Joe Rogan. You know, he saw Aaron Rodgers do ayahuasca this past year, and that was the big thing in football. So my dad kind of knew what it was. And, you know, I showed him the video. And at the time, Sean, the retreat owner, was taking people all through the jungle. So boat rides down the Amazon, motorcycle rides through the mountains. We ended up being very close to the community and didn't get the opportunity to do that. But that was only because it's gotten so dangerous in Colombia as of late. Guerrilla warfare, faction wars, it's going on all throughout the jungle. So when I told my mom that I was going to be doing that, you know, she was scared, confused, and had no idea what that really meant. So
I figured that.
Yeah. Well, we started the call with protective mothers, and I almost made a comment then, but yeah, I mean, what mother's not protective? And hopefully you didn't give her too much insight, so she wasn't a nervous wreck the whole time, and you came out the other end.
So I was going to the jungle the next day. I arrived in Bogota at about 12:30 in the morning. Probably did, I don't know, like 16 hours of travel. It was a long day. Finally made it to Bogota. It's 12:30. I'm exhausted, and I get down and like I'm waiting for my bags, and like they're not coming through. I'm like, "Where's my luggage, man?" Like, and then all of a sudden it started announcing the next flight coming in Spanish, and it was just like I had no idea what was going on. I was like, "Man, like, ¿Dónde está mi maleta? Like, where's my stuff?" And they're like, "Well, I don't know. Like, you got to go down here." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So, you know, I go to the airlines, and I do my best to tell them that, like, "Hey, like, I'm missing my bags." And they're like, "Oh yeah, like we left it in Miami." And I'm like, "Oh, you know, like, can I, you know, like, am I gonna get it?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, no problem. It'll be here in 2 days." And I was like, "Oh well, I'm going to the jungle, so we got to send it here." And they're like, yeah, we got you." And so I had my carry-on and then the one pair of clothes that I had. And so I go to the hotel. Like, I go to the hotel in Bogota because I have to get up the next day at like 2:30 in the morning, and it was 12:30. So I was literally going to go to bed for like 90 minutes. I like go to the Marriott at the hotel, shower, and I just remember putting on the same pair of clothes the next day, like 2 hours later, waking up having to go without my luggage, and I was stressed out. I was like, "Oh my God, like I'm really about to go to the jungle, meet these people I don't know. Still don't know if this is legit or not, and now I don't even have clothes." And you know, I had my one pair, and then American Airlines gave me a blanket to wear, like for the international flight. And so I ended up just keeping that and wearing it as a t-shirt for like half the time in the jungle. Shout out to American Airlines. Please find me my bags. At the time of this, okay, so I got back December 14th. I still don't have my luggage.
You still don't?
No.
What?
Still don't have my luggage. Totally metaphorical though. The idea of losing my baggage became very apparent to me, and so I embraced it. But I was stressed out, and so we went from Bogota, met up with the other people going to the retreat. Kind of, you know, met some of the guys and girls going. The 4 other people, and then we arrived to the jungle. So Putumayo region of Colombia, which is the only Amazonian state in Colombia. And we make our way to the retreat, into the jungle, and to the community that would be hosting us. Yeah, it was a long ride. We took a cargo van, and kind of got all our stuff in, got settled in. The retreat was absolutely beautiful. Just such a. I was writing about it this morning, working on my blog, talking about, you know, living a life in the medicine and living an intentional life. Just such a great transition to be able to practice some of that stuff and get in the habit of doing that. You know, it was right along a river, very much reminded me of my camp I have here in upstate New York that I have so many good memories at, especially with healing stuff. Excuse me. But yeah, the resort was beautiful. You know, I was staying in this little casita with a hammock in it, and it was just a beautiful arrangement, but I still did not have my luggage. And so I was kind of like keeping my fingers crossed that it would show up in the next couple days. But as it came to find out, I would not be getting my luggage back. So.
Oh my God, that's crazy. I saw something about you wearing the blanket.
Yeah, I posted on LinkedIn.
How long before you actually start into taking the actual medicine?
So the medicine, so ayahuasca is the vine, yahe is the drink, which is the tea they boil it down into. The ayahuasca we were drinking was actually going to be, it was very special. Normally when they cut the vine, it's about 2 to 3 years old for brewing ayahuasca. And so they had actually cut an ayahuasca vine that was 40 years old. And so this was a very special concoction of yahe, very powerful concoction.
That's just coincidence? It just worked out, fate would have it type of?
No. Well, yes, as fate would have it, yes. But there was special reasons why they ended up doing that, which I can get into. So we arrived there on Sunday. We drank ayahuasca for the first ceremony on Wednesday. So we had a couple days. The first day was really getting there, settling in. And then the next 2 days were introductions to the medicine. And so when you're working within the ayahuasca medicine, there are other plants that you use. And really what you come to find is when you live a life of medicine and you live in the medicine, you start to notice that everything is medicine. Todo es medicina. And so getting there over the first couple days, you know, we would work with things like sacred tobacco, and which, you know, is used to have wise conversations and cleanse space and move energy. So, you know, you would set an intention before you smoked your tobacco. You'd, you know, sit in the circle and light the candles on the medicine table, state your intentions, and then you'd smoke the tobacco together and blow the smoke on yourself and really set the intention of clearing and purifying and cleansing. And again, we were already on our dieta to do that. And then using these plants was basically having more tools in your tool belt once you got to the actual ceremony. And so we would smoke tobacco, and then, you know, there's a and I have all these in my room next door. But there's a plant called mambe, which is actually the cocoa leaf broken down. So it's this green, like matcha powder substance you throw in your lip, very much like a tobacco dip. And then there's a highly concentrated, it's like thick sludge, highly concentrated tobacco. And so you'd throw the mambe in, you put your finger in the tobacco, and then you basically smear it across your teeth or just lick it. And then you slowly swallow them at the same time. I think it's disgusting. But again, the idea is that, one, there's a balance between masculine and feminine, using the mambe and ambiel together. And again, it's all about cleansing and purifying and being able to be open and form a relationship with the plants.
You're preparing your palate, your system for it. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. So I don't smoke tobacco, and so that hit me really hard. Just like crazy tobacco buzz and like really trying to understand like what is going on. Same thing with the mambe. Obviously, I'd never done that before. But then there was one more tool called Rapé. It's a powder. and you shoot it up your nose. I've never shot anything up my nose in my entire life. It was one of the most powerful things that I've ever been hit with in my life. And it just burns, right? So again, you're just blowing tobacco up your nose. So there was the actual community where we drank yahe with the actual people of that community. And then there was the retreat center. They weren't far from each other, but two separate places. So at the retreat center, we obviously had our host, Sean, but then he also had some of his team with us. And so we used Google Translate to kind of communicate with everyone. I did my best to speak as much Spanish the whole time. But his helpers were there and really kind of, they live in the medicine. Again, they're drinking yahe twice a week. They're practicing all of this stuff constantly. And so they're teaching us about how to use rapé with intention and how to use it, in reverence and meditate on it. It's very grounding once you understand it. But at the time, it just rocked me. And it's hard to describe. I have a video of it I can send to you. It hit me, and we were kind of like up around the medicine table, and I felt really sick, just really nauseous. And again, what this medicine is, you're cleansing and you're cleaning out parts of you that need to go. And so, that could come from either end of the spectrum, whether you are pooping it out or throwing it up. All of that is very common during these ceremonies. So when the rapé hit me, I just felt very sick and nauseous. We ended up going down to the river, and I couldn't quite purge. I was like kind of in this halfway spot. And Andreas, which is one of the helpers there, he comes over and he's like, Dakota, you should do another hit of rapé. Like it's going to open you up and cleanse you out. And like, this is what you do. And I was like, oh my God. So now we're down by the water, and I do another hit of rapé, and this just rocks me again. And I was just like, oh my God, like this, and everybody else was seeming to like enjoy it. There was one other guy that held back, and he had a really hard time. But everyone else was kind of doing their thing, meditating, taking the rapé, meditating it, being able to sit with it. But for me, I was just like ready to clean and just purge some of this stuff out. And so I took my second hit of rapé, and I was just sitting down at this point. I ended up getting in the river to try to like clean myself off, like just like refresh myself. I was already miserable because I also still had one outfit. So it was like I was stressed out, and a lot of it makes sense. And then Sean eventually comes up to me, the retreat host. He's like, "Hey, I see you're not doing too well." He's like, "You're not going to want to hear this, but I think you should take another hit of rapé." And he's like, "I'm going to come back in 5 minutes." And he's like, I'll see how you feel." And as soon as he left, I stood up, and the thought of doing a third rapé, I was like, there's no way, like I'm throwing up. And so I just purging and cleaning out. And that was the first day, and it felt really, really good. I was like, wow, like I'm using this medicine correctly, right? And so at first, where I was like judging myself because I was like, wow, I'm having a really hard time with this, I was able to kind of move that through me, and I actually felt a lot of it come up. Felt a lot of energy about my father come up. I felt different parts of anger come out of me. And again, it was all just kind of random, but I recognized what it was, which was kind of interesting. And so that was kind of like day one, was getting introduced to those medicines and learning how to utilize them. And then, like night would kind of settle in. We'd stay around the medicine table and continue to have, wise conversations about healing and medicine and what we came here for. My whole intention was to lose the old story that I was looking at the world through. Again, in NLP, we don't experience objective reality through our senses. We experienced our perceived reality of our lens of the world to try to interpret reality. For me, I knew that came with a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, a lot of stories, and so my intention was to just be able to wipe that and start fresh. And so that was night one. Day two looked very similar. So again, practicing the medicines, taking more rapés, throwing them up, doing a lot better with it though, and really starting to understand how it can ground and cleanse me. And that rolled us right into the first night of ayahuasca. which was, a lot of anticipation. I stayed up with the guys before we were smoking tobacco, and they're like, what do you think it's going to be like? And it's like, what do you think it's going to be like? Because none of us had done it before. We'd all just heard stories and kind of done our thing. But what I admired was that, again, they did a really good job of picking the right people. I don't think that it's an appropriate thing to do for someone who's not ready to do the work. And in fact, I think it can really hurt people if they're not paying attention to that. And then also, like, the jungle is a crazy place. We talk about communities and ancient traditions, and there's a lot of wars going on in the shamanistic world alone, just between practitioners and tribes and medicine people. And so if you go to the wrong place in the jungle and you're with the wrong practitioner and you get served bad medicine and you get manipulated, there's a lot of weird things that happen in the unconscious world. And again, like, this is basically a portal to that. So I appreciated that. I felt safe. I was with good people. I was with the people who wanted to do the work. And with that, we woke up and kind of packed our stuffs up on day 3, and we were ready to head over to the community for our first night of ayahuasca. So we loaded up the motorcycles. We rode across town. These guys, they lived in, again, like, very simple lives. You followed a dirt road, all of a sudden there was no road, you kept going. Next thing you know, you're at their, like, town hall, which is just a shack with a tin roof and a whiteboard, and that's where the community would gather. We'd park our bikes and then we'd walk through the community. And these guys are completely self-sustainable. They live off the plants, they raise their animals, they live in wooden structures, and they live a very simple life. And it was beautiful to be able to walk through that community. The medicine is practiced in a space called the Maloka, which can be closed, can be open, doesn't really matter. But this particular one is, we would walk down into the community, and you essentially had the Titus house, which is just the master healer of the community. So the Titus house was right there. And then the Maloka was, right in the center of the community, essentially. And so the Maloka was a tin roof with poles on it and a bunch of hammocks hanging down. They had a beautiful mural of their family, their lineage, the healers that came before, the grandmothers, the grandfathers. So it was this beautiful mural of their lineage that represented the healing and the space that was actually there. And then it was just an open shack. And again, I'll send you guys some photos of it. We walked down and, they've got all the hammocks set up. And we basically walk into this community and they're already there. They're smoking tobacco, they're taking mambe, they're doing rapé, and they're just sitting around a circle listening to medicine music. And again, like, this is what they do. And so you get to the community, and we do this for hours. You don't drink ayahuasca until dark, at least with this community. Again, you could go to other retreat centers. They might drink, like, with the sun still up, and it might be over by midnight. They blow out the candle and you're gone. This was an all-night event, just rager. 2:00 a.m. That was like dropping down into second gear. It was like time to start working at 2 a.m. And my bedtime's like 8 p.m. So for me, it was like, oh man, like, staying up all night. But again, like, just practicing the medicine and staying in it. That really wasn't too crazy. But the reason why they ended up cutting the ayahuasca from a stronger vine, the first night, a lot of the people from the community were there. There was probably 20, 30 hammocks set up, which was crazy because we weren't expecting it. But they had a baby in the community that had to take some sort of vaccine, and they drink medicine as soon as they're born. So we had a ceremony with a 1-year-old that was doing ayahuasca with us, and everyone for the community showed up, and it was a super special night. But that was part of the reason why they ended up doing what they did with cutting a stronger vine. Was it was a really a healing ceremony dedicated to that for them. And then we were just there as guests.
And the potency is higher in a older plant.
I mean, I can't speak on that, but essentially, the idea there is that is that when you're working with an older plant, it just naturally has more wisdom, and again, understanding the plant medicine world and trying to make allies with plants. Absolutely. That's the idea behind that. So night falls. We eventually stopped smoking tobacco, and it's so funny because they had like a Bluetooth speaker they would bring down, the host would, and they'd listen to medicine music off it. And we're like in the most remote freaking place in the jungles of Colombia, and I'm sitting in my hammock kind of getting ready, and all of a sudden I hear power off, and I'm like, oh shit. like it just got real. And the jungle's so loud, like the birds, and they had puppies running around and chickens, and like it was wild. The music cuts off, and I'm like, all right, it's time to actually start the ceremony. And so the Maloka is such an interesting place because, again, it's a tin shack during the day. During ceremony, it just completely transforms, and I can't even, I just have so much energy thinking about it. We started the ceremony around like 8 or 9 o'clock, and it starts with basically a blessing. It felt like going back to Catholic church, to be completely honest. It was almost like a communion style approach. The healers would get up, they put on all of their drab, bone teeth from whatever animals, and just the sacred cloths, and it was wild, just crazy experience. And so they started blessing the medicine. Even more plant medicines are used in this case, stuff like copal, which is I believe like an Iranian flower, and it's essentially burned, and so it's used to clear space and clear out the Maloka. There's a lot of energy going on inside the Maloka, especially with 20 or 30 people in there. And so, they use the copal as a way to clear the space and get rid of stuff and really move the energy around. But, they bless it. We take the ayahuasca, we drink the yahe, just a small, it's like a shot glass, basically. They bless it. You take the shot, and then you go back to your hammock, and it's radio silence for the first hour. You're just laying in your hammock, listening to the jungle. You just took tea. You have no idea what to expect. And you're just kind of hanging on. I remember being in my hammock and just wanting to control the experience so badly. Just affirmations, really trying to just grip so hard, which you can't during, a plant medicine journey. That's the cosmic joke, is we think that we have all of this control. And, in terms of openness and experiencing new things, it's like, oh, I'll show you some stuff, but I remember trying to control the experience so hard. But with the baby, at one point I fell asleep, and I woke up in the medicine, and then my heart was really hurting, and I was scared because, one, I was not sober at this point. So I was like, am I even going to live through this? But it felt like I had heartburn, and I've never experienced that before, but that's what it felt like. And I knew that it was also cleaning me. At this point, it wasn't silent anymore. After about an hour, they start singing what are called ikaros, which are basically healing chants. And so it's like fans and just different chants. And then we turn the Bluetooth back on, and we're listening to medicine music throughout it. But at one point during the ceremony, I hear one of the healers say, Hakuna Matata. And I just remember thinking it was so funny, because I was like, why is he saying that right now? And what ended up happening was they had the baby, and they were holding him up like Lion King. And they were blessing the baby. And so he's like, Hakuna Matata. Everyone was laughing. And all of that energy was so special. Again, I woke up in the medicine, and so I was very jolted because I'd fallen asleep, and I woke up, and it was like, whoa. And all of a sudden you're not in reality anymore. And so I would learn to that laughter, that love, that joy, that fear, those shadows, all of it became the medicine. But definitely those moments where the joy and the laughter would come in, oh my God, it was needed. I think I posted on LinkedIn today, that was from my third night of ayahuasca, when I just really did not know if I was gonna make it. And to see the sun come back up the next day, and to know that you're I did it. It was just magical. The first night was a good lesson. Plant medicine speaks to you, and you can understand it in plain English, which is really insane. But for me, it immediately told me, Dakota, you only have the story that you have, around your heart, around your abandonment, which used to be a core wound of mine and a story that I would have and carry with me as a part of my heart surgeries. You know, being ripped from my mom's arms as soon as I was born, taken by people in white coats, fear of doctor. So I knew all of this stuff. I'd done all of this work up until that point. It was basically like, you know, Dakota, your heart is the way it is simply because of the stories you tell yourself. And I was like, whoa, like that was, you know, really intense. And by that time, it was probably 1 or 2 in the morning. Like I said, that's when we kind of shift down into the second and third gear. And so I was like, wow, like I did it, ayahuasca, cool. And I was feeling not sober, but I was feeling better. I was feeling more myself. I could stand up, move around, smoke a tobacco, kind of clear the space. I was watching everybody else go through their process. Around 2 a.m., they pick up the guitars, they pick up the drums, the music, and they start to play. And my God, those guys can sing their hearts out, play their hearts out. The medicine music they play is so beautiful and so powerful. And so, you know, you could stay in your hammock, you could go to the fire. I was sitting by the fire. I just watched my friends take a second cup. And I was like, like, I don't want to do that. You know, like whatever, you know, like I did my first cup. That's all I needed for tonight. And then I was sitting by the fire and it was like, Dakota, you came here to do the work. You know, like you didn't come here to sit by the fire and sing Kumbaya. And so, you know, in my broken Spanish, I was like, hey, it's like a small cup of ayahuasca thing. It's like, I got you, my friend. And so, you know, now all of a sudden it's 2, 3 a.m. and he's coming back with another cup of ayahuasca. And, you know, it was still my first night. It was still my introduction to it. So I took it and I, you know, went back to my hammock and I was really disappointed because I immediately felt the same thing I felt the first time around, which was that crazy heartburn. It just was super uncomfortable. And I was like, dude, if this is all ayahuasca is, like, I'm going back home. This is, you know, this is stupid. And Sean had come over to me. He's like, hey, what, you know, what's going on? What are you feeling? I was like, man, I'm feeling the same exact thing. Like my heart's hurting. And he's like, well, like, do you think it's medical or do you think, and I was like, no, like I'm getting the sensation that it, like, it's just being clean. He's like, all right, well, that's medicine. And like, this is what you're meant to experience. And so that's what the first night was. It was really uncomfortable. It made my heart hurt. I had these visuals of my heart. It came out of my body and it showed me that it was basically like dripping in this black sludge. And so I was like using NLP at that point, which is neuro-linguistic programming, you know, stuff that I've trained. I changed the heart. I turned it into a lavender color. I cleaned it off. It showed me what a pure heart looks like, how to live with my heart open. It was a beautiful experience. Kind of put it back in my body. And then I fell asleep. You wake up at about 6 a.m. That's when the ceremony ends. They bring out some tea and some, you know, fresh bread. You say your thanks for being alive. And then, you know, we're packed up and we're heading back to the retreat for a day of rest. The first introduction for ayahuasca for me was, you know, it was intense for sure. It wasn't what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting any of the physical sensations or really even communication in general. But, you know, they say that ayahuasca is a grandmother. It's a sacred grandmother medicine. And so I definitely got that from the communication. It was so loving, it was so powerful. And I had an amazing grandmother. And so I definitely sensed a lot of her energy in that as well, which made me grateful because part of me thought that I was going to be punished. Part of me thought that I was going to be forced to look at things that I didn't want to. And I thought it was going to be terrible. Turns out that they were saving that for night 3 for me. And so the first night was really just like, hey, like, this is medicine. Like, you're here to work. This is what you're up against. This is what you're working with. And this is what it is. You know, so we would go back and reflect on that and then head back in the following night for round 2. And round 2, I wasn't feeling it. I had a lot more anger come up, just from people there. And it was so beautiful because they were all mirrors for me. I could tell that each of them reflected parts of, you know, the same way I look at you guys. Just very much, these people would reflect parts of myself right back at me. And so it was making me angry, irritable, and I was going in with like a bad attitude on the second night. And I remember getting there and like laying in my hammock, trying to like take a nap and reset my energy because I definitely did not want to drink ayahuasca feeling like that. And I ended up sitting by the fire, smoking a tobacco when one of the guys came over to me, one of the healers in the community. His name was Siggy. And he was a former sergeant in the Colombian military. And so he sat down with me and basically just told me his whole journey of plant medicine and how he came into Yahe, like left the military. He was a guide. He started trekking people up into the mountains who were taking ayahuasca. Eventually he got invited, sat down, had a terrifying experience, ended up meeting his wife through the experience, like just this beautiful story, and totally reset my nervous system, like totally allowed me to reapproach the night in the best way possible. Sean, the host, ended up giving me some clothes to wear because I still didn't have my suitcase. But he gave me this shirt with a Jaguar on it. And I had it in my mind that I really wanted to see a Jaguar. I was just like obsessed with it. It was like on the wall, on the mural in the Maloka, like it was on my t-shirt. And, you know, in plant medicine, specifically ayahuasca, it's not common, but these animals show up in the medicine. Entities show up in the medicine, and of course, like it's up to us to kind of defer if they're an ally or if it's a part of our psyche or else, you know, all sorts of crazy things. But I like had this obsession with wanting to see a Jaguar. Okay, and so I had my Jaguar shirt on. I'm feeling much more comfortable. We ended up, you know, again doing our same routine, smoking, taking Mambe, doing rapés. And so the second night of ayahuasca for me was much more intense than the first night. And I only had 1 cup. So we drank, again, 9, 10 o'clock. I think it was a little bit later this time, actually. Probably 10 o'clock, lights out, radio silence. I'm a lot more loosened up this time. I'm a lot more ready to surrender. I'm a lot more able to just relax into the medicine and say, hey, whatever happens, happens. And again, I know that the medicine knows that. And so night 1 was basically just like, hey, you can do this, bud. You know, like you can drink this medicine and you can do this. And so that allowed me to relax. And again, I kind of fell asleep. 11 o'clock rolls around. All of a sudden they start the chanting. And again, like the Icaros and the chanting, it is, you know, we use the word trippy. It's the strangest experience that I think a Westerner could just show up to, you know, and experience themselves, because it's in a language you don't know. There's music going on and chanting going on and smoke going through malokas and all sorts of energy being moved, which you can sense. And so again, we start the ceremony. I ended up falling asleep. I wake back up. I remember looking at, because I could see the Jaguar's eyes on the wall from my hammock. I was in the center of the room. So I was like looking at this Jaguar, and all of a sudden I had to purge. So I threw up. And as soon as I threw up into my bowl, it was like flicking on a light switch into a different reality, a different world, very much different than the first night. And so as I'm throwing up into my bowl, like literally holding it, I see it transform into a Jaguar. And all of a sudden this Jaguar is looking at me. I guess even backing up, during the first night of my ceremony, in between my first and second cup, I've been working on this whole abandonment thing for a long time, right? And in between my first and second cup, I was smoking a tobacco outside, looking at the stars, and I was sitting down to someone else that was at the retreat, and she was like, Dakota, I can't have you near me right now, like you need to leave. And I was like, cool, like totally not triggered by it. I was like, you're definitely like going through a process right now, like very much in the medicine. I was like, I got you. And as I stood up and I started walking, like it came up like this whole abandonment thing again, and just feeling rejected and unloved and abandoned. And eventually Sean came over and got me almost immediately. He's like, hey, come sit with us. And like, it was gone. But I knew that I was working on that. And so this Jaguar like transformed in front of me on night 2 as I'm throwing up into this bowl. And all of a sudden I look up and there's Jaguar eyes everywhere. Through the entire Maloka, on people's hammocks, on people's faces, on our bags in the middle of the room, on the ground, on the, like Jaguars everywhere, right? And it starts talking to me, and it's like, Dakota, how can you be abandoned when I'm in everything? And I was just like, God damn, like it was just very, very intense. And so I call Sean. He's like an arm's length away because he's at his medicine table. I was like, Sean, I need to get up. Like, I don't know if I need to go to the bathroom. I don't know. Like, I just need to get up. He's like, all right, come on. Through this whole time, it's just so beautiful because, again, ayahuasca is a way to resurface the things that you don't want to look at and resurface your trauma so that you can deal with it in a new way, and you can heal those paths. You can heal those timelines. And so it was so beautiful because the way Sean showed up for me in this moment of my complete dismay. I mean, I was just absolutely not in my body anymore, going through something really difficult. He grabs me, he walks me outside the Maloka, and it's really refreshing to step out because, again, there's so much energy in that room. You're taking on other people's energies. That's why they're always clearing it. They're singing the songs to push the energy out. But at the time, like, I was in my experience and I could feel everybody else's. I step outside, the stars are out, it's beautiful. So like there's this outhouse with a shower curtain, and the Jaguar eyes are on the shower curtain in front of me. And I'm like, what am I doing? So I call Sean, and he's like, hey, I'm right here with you, brother. Like I got you this whole time. And it was exactly what I needed to be able to heal again, like this whole story of abandonment. And so we walk a little bit further into the jungle, and I'm just staring up at the stars, and like I'm just losing my body. Like he sees me like losing consciousness. And he's like, you got to sit down right now. He's like, we've got to get you hit right now. And so he rushes me back into the Maloka. We go right back to my hammock. All of a sudden, one of the master healers is coming over to me. And again, they'll sing their general Icaros. They'll sing them into people. These master healers know who needs what. But this one specifically, his name was Garzon. He's the most magical man I've ever met in my entire life. Just such a mystery, and such a normal guy outside of, the medicine, which is so funny. I'm very much in the deepest part of my experience, peaking on ayahuasca at this point. And he sings a healing song over me. He wipes oils and medicine over me. And he basically sucks all of that energy out of me and pushes it out into the space and out of the Maloka. I immediately felt better. Just immediately came back into my body. And I remember looking at Sean and I was like, how am I ever going to explain what the fuck just happened to me? And he just has like this big smile that comes across his face. And he's like, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about it. As he was singing those songs, the Jaguar was coming back to me. And that's when I got all those downloads. It was like, Dakota, how could you ever be alone when I am in everything? Like you have God inside of you. Everything has God inside of it. Everything is medicine. It's always been here. And so there's just simply no way that this story can be true anymore. And it literally just snapped it right in front of me, just gone. Wow. Super, super powerful. And then I stayed in my hammock and I felt like a little kid. I felt like a baby, just born again. And it was like 2, 3 a.m. They called for a second cup and I was like, I'm good. Like I had my experience. And that was the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. We ended up forming a circle around the master healer's medicine table. I've listened to medicine music for a long time. And again, it's just Amazonian music, singing songs about healing in Spanish like that. That's what I call medicine music. They were playing guitar, they were playing drums, and I was like, let me play the drums. And they were like, all right, come here. And so, it was probably like 4 or 5 a.m. Everyone's there, the Taita, the master healer, the rest of the master healers. And like all of a sudden, like it just comes through me. And so all of a sudden I have a drum in my hand, and like everything gets quiet and people are like, wait, what's going on? Oh, that's Dakota. All of a sudden I was just channeling this medicine music through me on the drum, in Spanish, in front of the whole group. I only got a small portion of it recorded on video. But it was just like otherworldly coming through my body, just totally for everyone there. And again, just like what a way to give a gift back to, that night, everything that just happened, everything that everybody else was experiencing. Some people were really deep in the medicine at that point because they had drank a second cup. So they were going deeper. And so that was a really cool experience that I kind of got to give back to everybody. And that's how we ended night 2.
It's crazy. And was there a night 3 as well, or night 2 was the final?
Oh no, there was a night 3.
All right.
So, and I know it's like, how do you even respond to this stuff? And again, that's part of the big integration, which is what I'm doing right now, is really trying to understand, like, was that real? Was that a dream? Did I actually experience that? What does that mean for my life? How do you come back to a Western world as an entrepreneur? I log back on LinkedIn and see people talking about whatever trivial things, trying to and I'm just like, man, like this is, it's tough, trying to integrate back into it and understand it. But yeah, so that was the second night, and we kind of rolled out again, kind of went back and had a rest day. And during that rest day, the idea was we circled back up and we got back on our game plan. And it was like, all right, you guys have gone through 2 nights of taking medicine, and really night 3 is all about finishing strong, shooting the arrow straight, and like going all the way to the breakthrough. And I was like, man, like if night 2 was not a breakthrough, then like I don't know what to expect. And really the message I got that was that I had to die. And I didn't know if that meant physically. I didn't know if that meant an aspect of me, but I had a knowing that in order for me to get what I wanted out of the experience, a part of me needed to die. And so, whenever you enter anything like that, it brought me back to open heart surgery. It brought me back to, having heart surgery wide awake, and all of these different crazy Budapest, and all these experiences I've had that I've come close to going too far, skimming the edge. I knew that it was going to catch me, knew that I would most likely survive, but I also understood and remembered what it was like to almost die. And the thought of going back to that place and retouching that surface was definitely something that gave me anticipation, fear, anxiety, all of that. But again, it's about surrendering to it and saying, yeah, I'm going to go in anyway. So third night, we go early. The Taita had called an audible, and he said, all right, you guys need to show up early. We're going to do an additional tobacco cleanse to really purify your body. And again, this was not part of the normal retreat. We show up, and all of a sudden, there's this pot being brewed on the fire, and it was with the abuelita, the grandmother. And she and I had a conversation about how she uses all the plants in the jungle to heal people, and she was basically creating a shower for us, a plant bath for when the ceremony was over. And then there was simultaneously another pot being cooked of tobacco. I have no idea what was in it, other than like it was basically tobacco water. And the idea behind a tobacco cleanse is you are drinking this tobacco water, knowing that you are going to throw up immediately. And so the Taita was blessing the pot. We each took 4 large glasses of this tobacco water, just drank it, chug, drank it, chug, drank it, chug, drink. And I was throwing up on my fur, like as soon as it touched my lips, it's just everywhere. But the purpose of that tobacco cleanse was to really and truly purify anything else that needed to be purged out so that we could shoot straight on this third night. And that definitely changed my experience. Night 3, embarks. We get to 9-10 o'clock. We start our usual. We start the ceremony. I drank in my first cup, and within 15 minutes, I was thrown up almost immediately, which was different than the other times because I'd fallen asleep and then woken up. And so it was still very early in the experience. And as soon as I threw up this time, I felt like this peace come through my body. And I was like, wow, like this feels so good. It felt like I was being tucked in by the jungle. And just felt this very heavy blanket coming over me, but just in such a beautiful way. It went all the way through the hammock. It just basically had me lay down. And I could hear the medicine talking to me. It was like very grandmotherly. It was like, Dakota, lay down. Just like, you're going through this experience. This is what I'm doing. And I felt this like spaceship coming in is how I can describe it. Before we started the third ceremony, we went back through and read our intentions. And so I reread that, I was showing up here to lose my old lens of the world. And so all of a sudden I had a knowing that that's what was coming. And this ship like basically came over me once I got tucked in, and I could feel it like pulling my lens off of me and pulling my story out of me. And at first I thought I was going with it to meet God. I was like, all right, maybe this is like what it is. And then all of a sudden I could feel that it was leaving without me. And I was like, oh, like it just took my old lens. Like I felt it. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then immediately it was like and now you need to look at your shadow. And I was like, oh man, like,
Oh, fuck.
I've been avoiding this. And one of my dreams leading up to, during my dieta, leading up to Colombia, I had a dream about my shadow, and it was terrifying. It was basically this like black tentacle being that like came out of my back, and yeah, it was just like a really scary creature. And I could felt that I was too scared to turn and look. So ayahuasca was like, well, that's fine, but like you're looking anyway. And so all of a sudden it's like tentacles were like back inside of me, and it was like turning my face to like force it to look at it. And there was no way I was stopping it. And I was like, oh my God. But I was like, okay. You know, I was very much in neutral at this point still. I was okay with the experience, even though I was like rejecting it. And what ended up happening was I had to go to the bathroom really bad. Like I had to pee. And so I was like, look, like I want to stay here. Like I want to learn this, but like I really need to use the bathroom. Like I was just talking to myself at that point. I was like, I'm just going to pee, then I'm going to get back in the hammock, and we can just like pick up where we left off. It was like, all right, game plan. So I like get up, I go to the bathroom, I come back, and I'm like completely sober. And I got to like look at my shadows for like literally just a second. I looked, I saw people's faces from my past, and I was like, oh, like, is this my shadow? And then it was like, nah, I'm just kidding, it's you. And it like erased everybody's faces, and it was just mine. And I was like, oh my God, like, yo, that's crazy. And so like I got up, I went to the bathroom, I came back, and I was like stone cold sober. And I was like, man, like, is that all the third night had for me? I was like, yeah, it felt really good. It just happened so quick. And I was like, you know, it came, it took my lens off, I felt it go, it felt really good. Like I understand the message, but like I couldn't help but feel this disappointment. So I got up, and again, everybody's having a totally different experience than me. I get up, smoking tobacco with Sean at the medicine table in the Maloka. And I'm playing the rattle along with some of the music going on, just like sending good energy, helping other people in the space, because I felt sober. And I ended up getting back in my hammock, and I kind of just like, I had my sleep mask with me, and it was probably 1 a.m. at the time, or 2 a.m. And I was eventually like, look, you know, I was up for a couple hours, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go to bed. Like, I'm going to accept that this was the lesson. I was like, I don't really understand it, and I do feel disappointed, but I'm going to do my best to accept that this is all night 3 was. And literally I like put because I didn't think that we were going to have a second cup for whatever reason. I laid down, put my eye mask over my eyes, snuggled up in my hammock, and literally 6 seconds later, Sean comes over and like knocks on my hammock. He's like, get up, we're doing another cup. It's like, oh no. And again, it was just such a cosmic joke, just such a funny reminder that, you know, we hold tight to things so much, and, you know, we want to direct our experiences, and really life is about the surrendering process. So with that, you know, we made the decision to do the second cup, and it was blessed by Siggy, which was the healer I had talked with on night 2. And again, just like with any other plant medicine, it's all about setting an intention. And essentially, he set the intention that this cup was going to go right through us, straight to the heart, and do what it needed to do. And so with that, we took the cup, we took our final cup of medicine, and went back to the hammock. And what happened next? I thought night 2 was the most intense and insane thing I've ever gone through. What night 3 brought was the most intense, terrifying, just, you know, really having to face things that I was prepared for. But again, facing off with having to die again, and everything that comes with that was an insane experience. Working with ayahuasca, things really started to get just enchanting, magical, not necessarily in a good way, not in a bad way either, but just insane. Again, I can't use words to describe it. I called Garzon back over, and I needed him to do whatever he did on the second night. to make me feel better, because I was ready for it. I was tripping very hard at this point, and I was like, I need to get out of this. Like, someone needs to help me. So I call him over, and he does his thing. Except for this time, it just sends me deeper into the medicine. And so instead of coming out of it, it was almost like being pushed deeper into it. And night 3 for me, again, it was about facing off with death, but it was also about coming through this intention and really cleaning out and sealing what I needed to. And so what I can describe, and I'll use my words, it felt like an exorcism. I was a marionette puppet for about 8 hours, and I did not have control of my body, but I was there with each of the songs that the Taita would sing, with each of the things that were coming through and going on in the Maloka. I was literally like a marionette doll, like arms, legs, no control, just like Pinocchio puppet, just being controlled by these healers, right? Like I was at their mercy. I was fighting for my life at this point. At least it felt that way. And so I was very sick. I was very much in the medicine, but I could feel that conversation of, it's time to die. And I did not want to at that point. I was like, nope, not going to happen. It was basically 8 hours of in this trance. And it was very much a trance of me moving through. And for me, like reflecting back now, it was very much my spine and my shadow coming through it, and how twisted and how much pressure has been on it. And all of the energy from my past and my old stories and my past lives, which are all interconnected. It was basically wringing that out like a cloth. And so that's why I was like a marionette doll, because at one point my hands would be, twisted one way, and my arms and legs would be doing different things. I would be like throwing up just black substances coming out of my body, and I couldn't control it. And I was sitting with bad posture, like just throwing up for like ever for what it felt like. And just when I thought I was done, and it was like, all right, this is where you die, I could feel it. Like I was losing myself. Like I was just fighting for hours and hours and hours. And it was like trying to lay me down to go to sleep. But I simultaneously knew that if I laid down, or at least I felt like if I laid down and surrendered, that it was going to kill me. I was like falling and falling and falling and getting close. And then I would feel this strength. I would feel that warrior. I would feel this hero come back up. And just when I thought I couldn't throw up anymore, the people who came to the retreat with me, my boys, they were taking on my purges for me. I could feel it just when I didn't have enough, and I like literally thought I was about to die. I could feel my purge come behind me from somebody else's experience in the hammock. And there were times where, because they were going through just as much as I was in their own version, but I could also feel that being passed back to me. And I would purge, and I'd be like, oh, that wasn't mine. Like that was for my guy behind me. And so again, like the Maloka is very interesting in that sense, because you're dealing with everybody's energy in it and everybody's stories, and you're trying to clear it out. Going back to all of us being mirrors for each other, I could feel it, I could see it, I was a part of it, and it was basically 8 hours of facing off with that shadow. I could feel it coming out of me as kind of like this scary looking creature entity. Like I could feel it over the top of me. Once I was eventually done throwing up, I still had this terrible posture, and all of a sudden, Sean came over. He's like, dude, you got to sit up straight. Like, you got to have better posture. And it was like, boom. And all of a sudden, like, I unlocked all of this power. And I'm like, dude, if I had just sat up, like, I could have reclaimed all of this. And then I like laid back in my hammock, and I felt even better. I felt supported. And I was like, dude, if I just leaned back in this hammock, like all of this, I could have skipped over. And it was really speaking to my process and how, for me, my whole life has been a discovery about finding my edges, finding new space, and really understanding that I have more than one option, right? And at one point I was so sick in the medicine, the guys wouldn't touch me. There was multiple times throughout the ayahuasca ceremony where I was like, Sean, like, let me just hold your hand, brother. Like I just need some strength right now. And at one point he's like, dude, I can't put my hands on you. Like I can see what you're going through right now. And I can feel your energy. And And he's like, this is your process. Like, you have to go through this process. And this was just me fighting off with being willing to die. What eventually ended up happening was I laid down and I closed my eyes. But at this point I was kind of tucked in. I was still very much in trance. Like, but I was done throwing up. And so I was like kind of tucked in under the blankets, and all of a sudden the music started, because it was like 2 or 3 a.m. at this point. So the energy of the Maloka changed. And each time I thought I was about to die, the music would turn on, they'd start singing their songs. My soul would just leave my body. Like, I was just gone for the entire song. At the end of the song, they hit the final strum. Everyone takes like a breath of fresh air. It's like, you could feel the energy leave the Maloka. Like, that's the whole point of the music. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm back. It's like, holy shit, like, what is happening? They'd start the next song, boom, I'm gone again for another 5-10 minutes. And it was like this for another 2 hours, just like keep going. And all the way up until 6 a.m. in the morning, which is when I took that video of the light finally coming through. I mean, night 3 was the biggest battle, the biggest face-off with darkness. What I ended up learning is that I didn't have to die, and that I could begin to find new space through music, through laughter, through stretching, through moving my body, through song, through swearing. You know, like, all of a sudden it was like quiet, you know, they were kind of like singing their songs, and I'm just like, oh my fucking God, like, what is happening? And all of a sudden I like felt myself come back, and I was like, dude, like, I'm feeling myself again. And then like someone in front of me, they like were making jokes. They like told a dad joke or something, because like it was like kind of later into the night. They were feeling fine. They didn't drink a second cup. And I just started laughing my ass off, and it saved my life. I heard the voice of the girl next to me. She just started talking, and I was like, Heather, you like literally are coming through like an angel right now. Like, I'm facing off with something that I can't even comprehend. And all of a sudden, like, I see a new option. I see a new choice. I have a new decision I can make. And what ended up happening was I transcended what was inside of me. I healed what was inside of me, not through having to die and have this, you know, brutal work, but rather I transcended it through joy and laughter and love. And that was really the big message for my entire life. But this third night of, you know, it's going to be okay. And, you know, you've let go of your old story, and you had to face, you know, the entity of that old story. Right? There's the entity of Santa Claus, right? Who's, you know, not a real figure, but through his stories, magic is created, and the story of Santa Claus becomes an entity. And so we very much carry those same stories within ourselves and our personal journeys. And the entity that I was carrying, of the story that I was carrying with me, was just one that I needed to come to terms with. And so that's what night 3 was all about. It was the most terrifying, scariest thing I've ever done. Indescribable to just be a puppet to someone else's voice. It's so powerful, and so grateful that people practice this stuff to clear and heal. And again, they do this every Wednesday and Saturday. Like, it's a random day of the week for them, but for me, it was just like the most craziest thing I've ever done. So, you know, we woke up, we took our plant medicine bath with the grandmother. She had made us our bath, and we said our goodbyes and kind of wrapped up our ayahuasca initiation off that third night.
Holy cow. When you wake up today,
mm-hmm.
What's it feel like compared to prior to your journey?
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. You know, you want to keep that feeling going. You want to stay in the medicine. You want to remember the learnings, and then simultaneously you're distracted by everything. You're back to work. You're running a company. You're talking to people who don't practice medicine and live a normal American life. And so right now I'm being pretty guarded with just my energy, my conversations. You know, I've felt a big call to this medicine path. I always say that for me, commercial solar and my sustainability company, it's always a means to an end. I think my real end result is that I want to own and operate a healing retreat center for myself. And so that's the path that I'm on.
So your goal too is to do some kind of recorded version of this yourself to tell the story, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I'm about, I just started writing up about night 1, very similar to kind of how we structured this. I kind of talked about my early, kind of set the stages for it. But definitely, yeah, I'm going to release that on the Heart Matters podcast as my continued episode after a year off or so. And that's where people can find that. It's going to be anchor.fm/heart-matters.
I have a lot of stuff I want to ask you and then kind of work through.
I get it. No, I appreciate you guys giving me more time than we had. I just looked at the time and I'm like, oh my God, I'm super grateful that you guys gave me the space to do this.
Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure's all ours.
We're grateful there's people and humans like you in the world that are out doing the kind of work that you are to share that kind of message with other people, and knowing that we're all connected and knowing that there is other resources other than just what we're programmed to think medicine is, or what we think therapy is, or we think a lot of things are. I think there's a lot more for the world to learn from people like you, my friend.
Agreed. Yeah, I reflect that right back into both of you, and I'm looking forward to a big year with both of you guys and spending lots of time together.
All right, that's a promise.
Dakota, thank you. That was amazing. Unbelievable.
More to come.
That's right.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
All right. Enjoy your weekend, gentlemen.
All right.
Be good. Be well.
All right.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.